Ah. So nice to see all of you here in Joburg doing this work, pitching up for yourselves. Yeah, it's really an honor to be here and to share with you a little of really what I'm going to be sharing is kind of my journey. So it's a very personal talk. So I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about the vulnerability of that because I normally talk about things or practices or processes rather than this one here. And to many intents and purposes, part of my work has been to move beyond a kind of real personal identification to kind of expand out. So it feels rather strange to be talking about myself. And yet, there's been something along the way. There've been some beautiful teachings, some beautiful medicines which I've received, which I'd love to share with you. And if anything of what I've experienced can be useful, that would be wonderful. Yeah, so I entitled it The Journey is the Destination, and that's really because, as I've gone on through different teachers, through different systems, through different layers, through deeper and deeper healings of myself, what I've discovered is I'm not really heading anywhere. So this is put very well by Ursula Le Guin. You need to head in a direction. It's really useful to go, okay, I'm doing this practice, or I'm working with shamanism, or I'm doing this thing. But in the end, you never really arrive. It's not about the thing that you think you're doing. It's about the process and the act of doing it. So, that's really one of the keys that I've discovered. I've heard it put another way around relationship and life. Somebody once said to me, I thought that once I'd gotten through all the shit and I'd dealt with all the stuff, then life could begin. And then at some point I realized that the stuff and the shit is life. So, it's not going to begin. It has begun and it is beginning and it's underway. So, yeah, another way of kind of encapsulating my journey and the things I've worked with would be these three main themes. And that's sort of how I'm going to be taking you through my journey. So I won't be doing it chronologically, like I was born here. And I'll be working through these aspects and how I've worked with them in life. And so sex is really the aspect of the lover. And money is the aspect of creativity and purpose and living your purpose in life. And God is that aspect of spirit, of the search. That you're all on, or you have finished, or you're looking at askance on the side of one eye, wondering whether you should get involved in it. Yeah. So, the lover. One of the, probably all the mistakes I've made, all the big errors I've made in life have been because of love. So I've left businesses and family and traveled halfway across the world to go and visit a lover, usually a woman, and only to discover that she's now met somebody else and stuck in a strange country with not knowing what to do or where to go, but yeah, this one said, live to the point of tears. Yeah, so lots of tears, and what brings more tears than love? I think we've all felt that heartache, that moment when we reach out, when we open ourselves, when we think, this is it, or maybe this is it, or we have some hopes about it being something, and then it isn't, and we feel, and so that's one of the things I want to share is this feeling, not blocking off from the feeling. That's something I've really learned, is to feel. And that's okay to feel. It doesn't feel safe to feel because, we're so layered in this culture and in this society because, it's a difficult place to live in. Survival is hard. Parents don't know what they're doing. The culture doesn't know what it's doing. In my tradition in Tantra, this is viewed as the Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. You just need to, what did I say recently? The existence of tamper-proof bottles really says a lot about this age and this world. It's not a happy time. There's so much suffering and pain around. And so it's natural to want to resist that, to want to create protection against that, to try and find a way to be safe. But then what happens? We live a life of safety and we discover that we're numb, we're dead, And as you start to work with the plants, as you start to work with these energies, they start to bring you alive again. And what's the first thing you discover when you're coming back to life is it's painful. So if you've ever had like serious numbness, when the nerve endings start coming back, it hurts. So that's one of the first things you start to feel when you start to move through the numbness, is the pain. And what better way to experience it or to live with it in life? To actually go for it. So my first big love was just out of university. I met a woman in Durban. My family was there, and we had a beautiful connection. And we were still kind of working stuff out. We were young. We were kind of figuring out this thing of life and love. And I always had this thing that, love can't be contained. So, when we're feeling, and everybody does, feel attraction to other people, instead of denying it, let's express it. I wasn't saying let's necessarily do anything about it. This really upset her and freaked her out. So she cheated on me. Which was a kind of strange thing, because I was saying, well, let's discuss kind of, opening up. And instead she kind of went and, met up with other people without telling me about it. So that was the first kind of crashing and realization. And then after that, I headed to India. And after that, I headed to India, and I met a woman there. She was a Finnish clothing designer. So she had moved from Finland to India, and she was designing clothes in India. She had a clothing label called Dakini Creations. Now in Tantra, Dakini is the awakened feminine, which guides men to their awakening. So even then I was being drawn towards that. She wasn't doing that work. She was a clothing designer. But that was like the first hint on my path. Well, not the first, but it was a big opening for me there. And it was just a dramatic love affair. You know, we met and we fell so deeply in love. And we would spend days making love. And the love making was transcendent. So there would be so much energy flowing through our bodies. We'd be in absolute bliss, like the kind of the lovemaking that you hear about or stories are told about, or you somehow know is there somewhere, but you never even really get close to. Of course, she had some very, very good charas, which is the pollen of cannabis, which I hadn't smoked much of before, so I think the charas actually definitely had something to do with these days of wonderful lovemaking. So, of course, the medicine was there right from the beginning also, which I didn't acknowledge right away, but which came through very strongly later. And then I came back to South Africa. Of course, you know, I wanted to marry this woman and be with her forever, and, you know, whatever it took. And while I was back in South Africa, she met someone else, and she wasn't as convinced as I was that we were soulmates. She did come out to South Africa to visit me, but she'd met this man in the meantime. So I'd arranged this amazing journey all around South Africa, the most beautiful spots. This was back in the year 2000. And she traveled with me, but she was basically telling me that she didn't want to be with me. We were sharing a bed. We were staying in these beautiful places together. And it really broke me wide open. So having gone from such heights to now being with this person, but having this kind of clear no at the same time, and then having this whole trip that we were on together, was deeply wonderful, in the most painful way. But it really opened me to something. And it was around that time that I left South Africa and started traveling. And then there were a lot more love affairs. We'd be here until the early hours of this morning if I took you through the blow-by-blows of all my love affairs. What I learned from it is to trust love and to dare to love and to really take the chance of love, because every pain that I went through or every unfulfilled love taught me more and more how to love myself. And deeper, I came to realize that the one person who was constant throughout all of this, throughout all the meetings with the other, was this one. And then I started to fall in love with myself, with my inner feminine. And that was just such a profound journey, and I started to get it. I was like, oh, they're all reflections of the inner. It's not about what's there. I'm falling in love with myself over and over again. And the deeper I go, the deeper the response was. So the external was really useful as a mirror to see those reflections of me. So this is my sharing here, is to trust love. And to be willing to work with your heart. And you know, the heart is a muscle. And what happens to a muscle when it gets broken down? It gets bigger. You know, that's what people do when they work out. You know. And tortoises are very safe, but they don't get massages. So, you know, it's starting to kind of drop that shell. And it's hard because it gets subtler and subtler. You know, this is what I discovered, you know, in some of my recent relationships, that the resistances and the layers of resistance get more and more subtle. And, one always kind of, the love always teaches you where you're resisting. Where am I avoiding relationship? Where am I avoiding this relationship? And how do I come more and more into relationship, ultimately with myself, but then from there into the reflections that I see of myself. There's an ancient Mayan greeting in Lakesh, which means you are another myself. And what better way to learn that than through love, than by making love, through sharing our body, through sharing our heart. It's been my most profound meditation. So, this is about, this is a German word, Lebenskünstler. It means artist of life, life artist. So this is this concept of, instead of life being about being a this or being a that, it's how does one bring artistry into your life? So where your art is not something that's out there, but it's your very being that you're creating. This is an amazing woman who lived about 3,000 years ago, a Greek poetess called Sappho, who lived on an island, the island of Lesbos, and it's where the word lesbian comes from, and the word sapphic. It's not certain if she was or wasn't a lover of women, but she was a lover of everyone and everything. And she was known as one of the greatest poets of the time, and only fragments of her work have survived down all that time. But definitely very awakened. And I just love this quote of hers, because she's saying, allow your energy, allow your being to be beautiful, to present yourself to reality. And then the grace, the muse comes, the blessings come. And this is again really about not settling. This is a wonderful piece from Zorba the Greek, where he says, occasionally we have to be excessive. And this was another aspect of my life, my poor parents. The two main areas I teach, I serve a boga, so I do boga ceremony work, and I help people healing their sexuality. And so one night I was sitting there with my mom, and she's like, "Is it just sex and drugs then?" And maybe it is. But the idea is that these are powerful energies. These are powerful forces. So let's tap into these forces. Let's tap into this energy. Let's learn to not be afraid to go a bit wild occasionally, to drop all our resistances, our proprietary, our properness, and go a little mad, and enjoy ourselves and be in that. And how this relates in my life really is I studied what I wanted to study. So I studied theatre, drama, and philosophy, and I loved my studies. But of course, when I got out of that, it's like, okay, well, how are you going to make money? How are you going to make a living? Because there's not much call for philosophers. And what's the joke about actors? What's the difference between an actor and a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket? Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket can feed a family. So there was like, so then the internet came along, the internet was exciting and it was interesting, and I got involved in the early days of internet solutions up the road here, and it was fun because it was all new and technology was exciting. And so I managed to, much to my parents and other people's surprise, I managed to support myself and survive. And then I took that, in between love affairs and running off to sit with gurus, I would come and earn money, and earn enough money to go on the next adventure. And then I was working in London in the UK, and I had a child when I was 28, unexpectedly, and so suddenly I had a dependent who I needed to support. The mother and I didn't get married, but that was suddenly okay. Now I need to support this other being, and I need to pitch up in this way, and so I need to figure out how to make a living. And so I was working for tech companies, earning a really good salary. And then when I turned 30, it kind of hit me like there was not enough joy in my day. So, I had a really great job. I worked with beautiful people. I had a lot of freedom in my work, but there wasn't joy in it. And so this was the big challenge: is how do I tap into my purpose? And I didn't really know how to do that. I knew it was something around this which I'm doing now, but I couldn't imagine how that could support me. But then I just had to learn to start following my excitement and my desire. So I quit my business and I started a film company in London. And I had to moonlight to make money, and film was the thing that was exciting for me. And so I did that for a while. And then it was very similar to my love affairs. I kind of went from the one excitement to the next excitement, to the next thing, kind of just following the butterfly, and really, really trying to find what it was that was going to really bring me joy, and then also be recognized in the world and be supported. And this was a key insight around the need to work. So, what I've done is I've lived this quite wild, unconventional life, but it's been incredibly disciplined within that. Really committed to my wildness, or my uncommitment, or my, kind of working in that and with that. And when you trust that again, then again it leads you true. It's also like a compass within you that shows you the way, and it's very similar to the energy of sexuality, because there's a certain kind of excitement when you're doing what you're meant to be doing. So, if each of you thinks of, what your deepest hobby is, or, the thing which you really love to do, if you found it yet, a lot of people haven't yet, and the feeling that you get when you're doing that thing, it's not unakin to being with a new lover, the excitement around that. And again, that's a compass. That's a way of navigating, of giving you the direction. And this is an important insight here. This is Oscar Wilde when he was in prison, and he was sharing about his life. And he was saying that, he wanted to experience all of life. And, but he only wanted to experience the good things, the happy things. And the thing is, when you really throw yourself into it, anything that you really desire, that's a worthwhile goal, is going to be a lot of difficulty along the way. You're going to meet various barriers. It's like existence saying, do you really want this? Are you sure you want to be a filmmaker? Are you sure you want to teach people? Are you sure you want to facilitate medicine journeys, you know? And then suddenly you're facilitating a medicine journey and, you know, somebody's kind of going a little crazy and they think you've poisoned them and, you know, and they think they're dying and you've got to take them to hospital. And you're like, okay, you know, why am I here? And what do I need to do now with this person? You know? And, you know, in that work it's also sometimes very clear that sometimes, you know, I mean, with iboga, it's very sensible to dose in stages. You don't want to dose all at once because it's a huge energy. So you want to allow the energy to, allow the system to acclimatize to the energy. And then sometimes somebody's purging and they're not feeling good and they don't want any more. And you know that, you know, if your duty to them is to be fulfilled, in this instance, why they've come to see you, they need more medicine. They don't have enough yet. That's why they're struggling. So you've got to get more medicine down. Somebody who's just vomited 6 times and is feeling dizzy and doesn't want to take the medicine. It's normally when I put the enema bucket up. You know, you can take it in your mouth, or you can take it another way, and then that kind of convinces them. But normally what I find in those cases is it's actually here, again, coming back to the reflection. So recently I had a surgeon who was on a journey with me, who was like adamant he wasn't going to have any more medicine. And the medicine's telling me, and my experience is telling me, this guy needs more medicine. And, you know, I mean, iboga is incredibly persistent. You've got about 24 hours through the journey to work with somebody, so you've got time. And so, you know, I'm going back to him, how about now? No, I'm not having it. Okay, wait, 15, 20 minutes. Okay, how about now? No, okay. And then like, I go outside the room and I'm like sitting on the wall and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to get some more medicine in this guy? And I have this picture of a surgeon in surgery, and the surgery's not going well, and he's like said to his team, you know, just take care of things. And he's gone and he's stood outside, you know, in the ER, and he's like, what am I going to do? And I'm like, oh, okay. So I go and sit down with the guy, and I'm like, okay, well, you know, when you're in mid-surgery, you know, and it's not going well, what do you do? How do you deal with it? And he's like, okay, I get it. Well, this is how I deal with it. And yeah, it feels good now. Let me have some more medicine. And again, it was just me tapping into him or seeing the reflection that gave the keys. And so this is, again, it's about knowing yourself. You know, how do I, and we have to make a living in this world. So for a lot of people on a spiritual path, that's a difficult proposition. Why? Because money is used so abusively, you know, and people are using it to control other people and manipulate them. And I don't want to have to deal with it. But it's a tremendous teacher, like love. There's so many lessons in it, in how to stay, and how to be, and how to give your gifts. So many people wouldn't give their gifts if it wasn't that you had to give them in order to survive. Because, oh, I'm doing great, I can just, you know, sit here and be enlightened and, you know, enjoy, you know, being in bliss. But no, I need to survive now, you know. So it gets you into the world. It's a tremendous teacher. How do you earn money without giving up yourself? You know, because there's so much fear around survival, the instinct is to, you know, to draw back. Oh, I've got to compromise. So that was my big thing. It was like, well, once I've got enough, I got a bit of money, so then I started all these kind of tech companies to, you know, make a few million. I've always lived very frugally. So, you know, a few million would last me ages, and then I could do my work around spirituality and teaching and sharing, and I'd be okay. It was iboga that told me that I had it backwards on my first few big iboga journeys. I was like, no, do what you love and you will be supported. But until you're giving your gifts and you're in your flow, you're not going to be supported. And so, I mean, you know, I started an amazing web video company. My partner died of brain cancer, you know. So it was like clearly not working. You know, I tried many things to do that. The interesting insight here, though, is nothing is wasted. So all my web development work now comes as part of my teaching. You know, it's useful knowing about that. So everything you've done will eventually be incorporated in who you are and what you're meant to be in this world. So none of it is wasted time. You know, it's all going to be valuable. It'll all come clear at some point. And so this is a big one. And Saraha was a Tantric Mahasiddha, which means, you know, great teacher. Of course, his teacher was an unknown Dakini who lived in the burning guts, the charnel ground, who made arrows, who was from the lowest caste. And Saraha was a Brahmin from the highest caste. And he was well known as a very well-respected teacher. And he met this woman, and something in her really moved him. He realized that he needed to submit himself to the feminine in order to proceed further beyond himself. And so he went to live with her in the place where they burned bodies, in a shack. And it was a huge scandal because here he was, royalty, living with this woman in this place. But he knew that that was his next step. So often there is pain, you know, when we let go of our comfort, you know, our comfortable paycheck. You know, and I've had a lot of that pain in my own life. You know, around the time when I started really stepping into my truth and my path, you know, I actually, my parents are very wealthy. And I went to them, and they've always been like very clear about me earning my own money and making my own way. I said to them, look, I'm trying to do this thing. I'm trying to give to the world. And if you could just support me for 6 months, they were like, no way. We don't value what you're doing. We think it's crazy. You know, you need to make your own way. So I, you know, ducked West Bank for about a year and didn't pay my car and figured out various ways. And eventually I paid them off, and, you know, I got back on track. But that took a lot of courage, you know, and there was quite a lot of pain around that. But it was worth it, because by going through that, it meant that I dropped another layer, and I became more myself. And so this is a great line. I just love this, you know. So often we think, oh, you know, I lost that job and it was terrible, you know, or that person didn't pitch up, and always when we look back at it, it's like, oh wow, I was really lucky that, you know, that piece of bad luck turned out to be really helpful. So probably the deepest thing from young, Alana mentioned that I was initiated at age 12. My mother was a disciple of Osho's. Most of you have heard of him. He was an Indian guru teacher. And so when I was 12, she went over to his community. He was living in the United States at that time. And I traveled with her. And after being around the community and seeing the people and the way they lived, I was like, I also want to take sannyas, it was called, and kind of join this path. The community then fell apart, and Osho was arrested and chased out of the States. And I had to come back to South Africa in 1986, in the middle of apartheid, well, towards the tail end of apartheid, but back to, you know, from a very kind of wide, open, crazy, very expansive life, back to all-boys boarding school in Joburg. I went to Cares, you know, kind of trying to fit in there again, having fights with other boys because I was different and strange, and, you know. So the you know, even from then, there's been this kind of sense of, you know, there's something out there and this desire to discover it. During high school, I kind of rejected that whole path. And I went into ritual magic because it was really different to this mystic stuff that I'd kind of inherited and I'd done. So I spent a couple of years working on the magical path and meeting various teachers and doing initiations there. And that was, interestingly enough, I was doing a very deep year of magical practice every day around the time I met this woman in India who I told you about earlier. So, the spiritual work was informing the love, was informing, the life artistry. None of them were separate. They were all happening at the same time. And then the year after she went back to India and left me, I went over to meet this magician mentor of mine in the States. And he was a 6'5", 300-kilogram American, and he features a bit later on in my path, very interestingly. But from then I met him, and kind of that sort of like his intensity and some weird things that I saw in him kind of pushed me back onto my earlier mystical path, and I went back into practicing around my teachings from Osho, and became very deeply connected again with that way. And but always learning. So when I moved to London around the same time that I was kind of becoming an actor and a filmmaker and quitting my internet job, about the time I was turning 30, I was doing a lot of sitting with various spiritual teachers in the non-dual Advaita tradition. And the Advaita tradition is about, you are God, there is no separation, it is all one. And you simply need to be with and experience that oneness right here, right now. And I was doing a tremendous amount of work there, and I had a number of profound awakenings. I ended up living in the park in London. The awakenings were too much for my energy system to handle. So, yeah, they were I had to drop out of society, walk around barefoot. I was living in Hackney Marsh under 2 huge cherry trees, so I could climb into the trees and pick cherries. Yeah, where are we? Right, so that was, I had tremendous satori's openings while living in London around the time of living in the park. I felt like the top of my head had opened up. There was tremendous silence. I stopped sleeping. I would just lie. I knew my body needed to rest, so I would lie and rest at night. But if anybody came to me, I'd be immediately awake. People would gather around me. I'd go to parties, and I'd kind of be sitting meditating in the corner, and I'd open my eyes, and there'd be like 6 or 7 people around me, and they'd be like, wow, it feels good here. And then, interestingly enough, I was in the space of no self, of no identification with self. There was no I. I was just everything. And a friend of mine, a South African friend, had got some skeletonium. So here come the medicines again. And he's like, hey, I got this new substance from South Africa. Would you like some? I observed the hand going out because there was no I to do that. And he gave me a whole lot of drops of skeletonium, which I then took. I then needed to go lie down because there was this huge vortex of energy around me, pouring through me. And an hour later, I sat up and I'm like, oh, I'm back, after 2 weeks. So it actually, in a way, you could say it brought me out of the satori. And another way, you could say it took me deeper, beyond that layer. And then shortly after that, I came back to South Africa. Was trying to reintegrate in South Africa. Still a lot of that kind of satori space coming up. And then what happened is I met the Tantrikas. a group who was practicing here in Joburg, with a guy called Rahasya who founded a school, and some amazing women who were working with him, who were really going into their shadow. And of course, in all my non-dual work and all my connecting with Pure Source, what I hadn't done is I hadn't examined my shadow and my darkness. And so I started going into that. Not very willingly. I thought these guys, people were crazy. There was an attraction to connect with them, mainly to my beloved friend and sister Crystal, who, we had a 4-year deep love affair. So there's the love again, drawing me into this thing that I wasn't really sure about, but it was so compelling. I was so deeply interested in her that I was drawn into it. But I was kind of going, you guys are mad. Like, what are you doing? Why are you playing in all this darkness when there's so much blissful light to be in? Of course, unless the darkness is acknowledged and integrated, the light is a layer. So then what happened is, as I started to go deep into Tantra, I was stabbed multiple times in Cape Town while walking through Woodstock at night. My sciatic nerve on my right leg was severed. It took me a year to learn how to walk again, and I spent a year in absolute agony, in nerve pain, because the nerve, as it was regenerating, it was like my leg was in a vat of acid. And the only thing which would really help me a bit with the pain was yoga. If I would do a yoga set, I would get the pain reduced a bit. And of course, all my childhood wounds and shadow. In the end, I had to live with my mother. So our stuff, we ended up going to therapy together. So a lot of our stuff was coming out during this time while I was going through this. And so the stabbing was in the year 2006, so 10 years ago now. But from there, I kept going, because I started to learn about this thing of going into the shadow and working with it. And more awakenings happening. And then the medicines came back, at some point on the tantric journey. I mean, one of my first experiences with medicine was growing my own mushrooms at the age of 21, just out of university, and taking a 4-gram dose after fasting for 2 days and having the whole universe dissolve. And that was really my first medicine experience. So I knew the power of them. But when I was in the Advaita world, a lot of the teachers were against medicines. They were like, this is not a true awakening. So there's always this debate, where the various Zen traditions and some of the mystical meditative traditions are like, oh, well, can you show me your awakening, without the medicines? And then some of the medicine people are, can you show me your awakening if you have some of the medicines? So this is a really interesting dialogue. And I want to commend Alana for really bringing that into Plant People, because I think that these teachings are important. A lot of the entheogens open the gates, but they then need to be integrated. And that's where the meditative and the yogic and the Qigong practices really help to integrate some of the openings received from the entheogens back into one's life. So on this journey, working with the various medicines, and especially working with Iboga, which was just such a profound medicine for me, but partly because I was so right. I'd done so much work, and so much work on my shadow, and then the Iboga just everything kind of clicked into place on so many levels. And yet, I discovered that this is true, there's always another layer to the onion skin, no matter how much we think we've got it worked out, something comes along and shows us, that remain a beginner, remain in that freshness. And that's not to say one doesn't acknowledge, what's happening, that there is a certain energy, and otherwise I couldn't teach, so that there is some peace, and that there are some things that have happened here, that have cooked here, that I am able to share, and there's something which flows from me to others, and I see that, and so I acknowledge that, but at the same time, one of the projects which I have at the moment is called the Dharma Lab, and that's about a teacherless space where people come and work together in terms of finding your own realizations. And so this is also one of the key things, is the kind of place where you're finding your realizations, but actually just before I talk about that, what I wanted to talk about is the end of the seeking. So at some point, the search itself kind of comes to an end. And it's not because one has found everything, but because you're just kind of like resting in the ground of your being, and then what is needed is arriving. There's a wonderful story about the seeking modes by an Indian poet called Rabindranath Tagore. And Tagore says, I spend my whole life searching for God, looking in the deepest jungles, on the highest mountains, in the most amazing caverns. And he said, eventually I found God's home. And I was there on the steps, at the door, about to knock. And just as I was about to knock, I thought, well, what happens if I knock? Then it's all over. The wonderful search, the beautiful caverns, the forests, all the places where I was searching for God, it's going to be finished. So I actually took my shoes off because I didn't want him to hear me. And I tiptoed down the stairs and away. He says, now I'm still searching for God, but I know where God lives, and I'm very careful to never go there. Beautiful expression of all the joy and delight we have in seeking. And so that is something which is hard to give up, this notion that I need to improve myself, that I can be better, that I can be a bit smarter, a bit quicker, a bit whatever. If I just, that new medicine, that what and what? Oh yeah, I haven't had that. If I just take some of that, maybe now I'll get there. Chogyam Trungpa, the teacher, he calls that spiritual materialism. This desire to always have more, or be special in the spiritual sphere. Oh, that was my place in the woods. Some silver birch trees in Hackney Marsh in London. So yeah, the Dharma Lab, this comes in here. There's this concept, it's primarily a Buddhist concept, but not only, of the Bodhisattva. One who supposedly delays his own awakening until all beings are enlightened. So the concept is that, I'm going to work for the good of all beings, and I will be of service. So once I've realized some of my own things, once I've found my true purpose, now I want to share with others. This beautiful man, the 14th Dalai Lama, what a simple, humble, beautiful soul. And so that's his expression of the Bodhisattva work. The big irony around this concept of Bodhisattva is, if it's all one, if we are all one, what other beings are we striving to help until we experience our own final awakening? So let that be a seed. I'll leave that one for you guys to sit with. And of course, if I am all others, if this is all my reflection, then the only one I can really help is myself. But by helping others, I help myself. They are not separate. And this is kind of where I wanted to bring in the Dharma Lab. You know, I mean, we've got to end with Dr. Zeus, right? Yeah, it's about becoming yourself. No one can teach you how to become yourself. So this is where ultimately this concept of one needs to kill the Buddha, or one needs to drop the teacher, because you have to be yourself. And so ultimately you have to leave your teacher, whether that teacher is a plant or a person. Even the Buddha said, he said, once one has crossed the river, one does not then carry the boat on one's back. And it is the same even with the Dharma, the teachings. Once you are across the river, you do not continue with it. Most people try and do this too early. So that's, you know, our rebel, which is like, I know what it is, and screw the teachers, and, you know, I don't need anyone to tell me, you know, which is a good thing, because it's that energy which is going to get you through a lot and not get you caught up in being deceived by people out there. But you can't be deceived anyway. So again, you know, this was my other thing with the seeking. Just like with the love, I went to all the teachers. I went and sat with everyone. And even the craziest teacher, so my magic teacher, the giant cobra. So I reconnected with him in 2010 after going deep into my tantric journey. I thought, well, maybe it's time to go and meet my magical mentor again. And he had gotten even crazier. At this point, he was living in the woods and mountains in California, in a rundown shack with 25 wild cats running around. So I went to stay with him. He'd got even fatter. So he was huge. And I arrive at his place, and my friends dropped me off, so I don't have transport. I'm at his place in the hills, and he was horrified that I was stabbed. His first question was like, well, where was your gun? It's like, I didn't have a gun. He's like, well, maybe that's why you got stabbed. He's got a point. So he's like, he was going to teach me how to shoot. So, you know, but we've got this old kind of flintlock gun with black powder. And so we're doing shooting lessons in the thing. He's so fat that he can't actually breathe properly. So he's got one of those sleep apnea machines, which is helping him like keep his airways open. So the machine's running all night. The cats are wandering around the house, which hasn't been cleaned in ever. So I managed to clean a spot where I've got my little mattress on and I'm sleeping. And the machine's running, and he's on a blow-up mattress, which is deflating during the night. So he's also waking up to use a hand pump to blow up his blow-up mattress. So he's decided that the teaching that I need is that I need to learn Chinese, but not just Chinese, but I need to learn Mandarin and Cantonese, one Mandarin lesson followed by a Cantonese lesson, while drinking these shots of cannabis tincture, which he's made. He's put through an alchemical process, this amazing still. He's following Frater Albertus's plant stone alchemical process. The cannabis is so dark, it's coming out black with the green. And we're doing these shots of cannabis, which is stronger than any ayahuasca I've ever had. It's like taking my head off. Then learning Chinese. Then the sleep apnea machine. And I was very grateful to Josh for curing me of the guru and needing a teacher, and needing an external teacher. We ended up, he ended up dropping me off on the side of a road somewhere and telling me never to speak to him again, and driving off, and barring me on Facebook from ever contacting him. And it was perfect. I then ended up staying in Oregon because we'd gone up on a road trip. I'm not even going to tell you about the road trip. But we'd ended up in Oregon, and I ended up renting a tiny little attic cottage for a month. And it was about 40 degrees in Oregon at that time, really hot. And there was no air conditioning in this attic. And I just sat there and sweated for a month and just went. And I'd gone to America for a woman, who'd left me about the same time as I met Josh. So I was heartbroken in this love affair where she had gone somewhere else. So that was kind of wrapping up all my different disparate threads. And kind of like a beautiful settling of these parts. And just starting to step into becoming myself. There's one more slide. And this is where I am now. And this is what I'm working with now. It's just understanding that happiness that is always there. That's prior to thinking. That's prior to attention. That's there in the ground of your being. And you can tap into it at any moment. You just have to open to it.